My name is Diane Blake. I'm 58 years old. I run a little hair salon in Portland that I opened right after my youngest started school. I've raised 3 children on my own, and I thought I knew what unconditional love looked like. But nothing prepares you for the moment your daughter looks you in the eye, on her wedding day, in front of strangers, and calls you a thief. It didn't happen all at once. Life doesn't usually crumble in a single blow. It breaks in quiet places first. Missed calls, last-minute disinvites, holidays you spend alone without asking why. I used to tell myself they were just busy, that kids grow up and forget to call. But when you pay for the wedding and still don't get a seat at the table, it becomes harder to pretend. This isn't a story about anger. It's about clarity. About the exact moment you realize that everything you gave away, your energy, your savings, your time, your silence was never seen as love, just expected. And how once the veil drops, you can never put it back on. If you've ever loved someone so much that you forgot how to love yourself, if you've ever been told you were too much or not enough by the very people you built your world around, then maybe this story is for you. I don't tell it to ask for sympathy. I tell it because, for the first time in my life, I'm choosing not to disappear. The morning of Madeline's wedding felt like a movie set. People rushing in and out of the suite, curling irons buzzing, coffee cups half finished and scattered on every surface. The makeup artist was late. The florist was missing 2 boutonnieres. Someone spilled champagne on the veil, and everyone looked at me to fix it. I kept moving, holding safety pins between my lips and tissues in my sleeves, quietly patching things up while staying out of the photos. No one really spoke to me, not in a way that made space for me. They asked me to steam the bridesmaids' dresses, to grab protein bars, to find Advil for someone's headache. At one point, I was kneeling on the floor, pinning the hem of a gown, and Madeline just stepped over me like I wasn't there. Her fiancé's mother, Margot, stood by the window giving instructions, her voice sharp and composed, like she ran the whole show. In a way, she did. She had connections, money, and the kind of elegant detachment I could never pull off. Madeline had become someone I barely recognized. Her words came fast and clipped, her eyes darting like a boss managing a high-stakes launch. She looked beautiful. I remember thinking that, breathtaking, even. I stood behind her while she adjusted her necklace in the mirror, and I whispered how proud I was. She didn't respond. She just laughed soft and cold and said, "The earrings are worth more than your house, Mom." Then she turned away before I could react. I laughed too, just so I wouldn't cry. Pretended it didn't land the way it did. I'd taken out almost half my retirement to help pay for this wedding. She knew that. I told myself she was stressed, that she didn't mean it, but the truth is, she did. That line had been waiting to come out. It wasn't about the earrings. It was about showing me my place. And I played along. I smiled. I zipped up dresses. I fetched champagne. I told myself I was being generous. I told myself this was love. But somewhere in that suite, surrounded by lace and perfume and women who looked right through me, something in me went quiet, not bitter, not angry, just quiet, like a thread that finally slipped loose. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning. The ceremony took place in the rose garden behind the hotel. Everything looked like a magazine spread. White chairs lined up in perfect rows. A string quartet played soft music while guests filed in, murmuring and adjusting their sunglasses. I walked alone to my seat in the 3rd row. I wasn't listed on the program. My name wasn't on the seating chart. Someone had to check with a planner to even find me a chair. Madeline looked radiant, arm in arm with her father. He was glowing, like this was his moment too. The photographers followed them like a spotlight, snapping photos as they made their way down the aisle. I reached for my phone, but stopped. I knew they wouldn't want any shots from my angle. I watched as they posed for family portraits, her father, and his wife. They laughed like something had finally been completed. My chest felt tight. I sat quietly, trying not to ruin my makeup. Later, at the reception, I noticed I wasn't at the family table. Margot was there, along with Madeline's new in-laws and my ex-husband. I was placed at a table near the restrooms, next to a few distant cousins I hadn't seen in years. No one came over to check on me. No one asked how I was holding up. I clapped during the speeches. I smiled when I was supposed to. I even stood when they asked parents to join for the last dance. But no one called my name. I'd started feeling it the past few years. The quiet shifting, holidays where they chose to visit their father, trips they planned without mentioning it, gifts sent late, if at all. I told myself it was normal, that grown children have their own lives. But that day, sitting in my floral dress, hands folded neatly in my lap, it hit me with full clarity. I had poured every part of myself into raising them. And now, I was just a name on the guest list. I was present, but not included. After the ceremony, everyone moved toward the photo area near the old stone fountain. The photographer called out names, arranged the bridal party in neat layers, then started with the family shots. I hovered near the back, waiting to be waved in. I wasn't. Madeline posed with her father and Margot, then added the groom's side. When the photographer glanced at me, he paused for half a second like he wasn't sure who I was, then turned away. I walked back to my table slowly, pretending I needed to check something in my purse. My table was far from the center, close to the buffet line. A few acquaintances from church were seated nearby, but they were more interested in their shrimp cocktails than small talk. I looked around for a familiar face. Aaron was taking selfies with the bridesmaids. Ben had disappeared. I felt silly for wearing heels. My feet hurt, but I didn't want to leave early and make a scene. During the toast, when the DJ called for the mother of the bride to stand, there was a pause. A few people looked around, confused. Madeline laughed lightly and raised her glass. I stayed seated. No one seemed to notice, or maybe they did, and it was just easier to ignore it. I thought back to the Christmas before last, when all three of my kids went skiing with their dad and Margot. They said it was a last-minute trip. I saw the photos online. I had always told myself they needed to know their father, that giving them that space was the right thing to do. I never asked for holidays or birthdays. I wanted to be the steady one, the one who never made them choose. But here I was, at my daughter's wedding, seated like an afterthought, watching a life unfold where I no longer seemed to belong. I was present, but not included. I had just picked up my coat from the back of the ballroom when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was the wedding planner. Her smile was tight, like it had been sewn in place for too long. She said Madeline needed to see me upstairs. I assumed maybe she wanted a moment alone, maybe to say thank you, maybe to hug me before the night ended. But when I walked into the suite, the air was cold. Madeline stood near the vanity, arms folded. Margot was by the door. The planner followed me in and shut it behind us. No one offered a chair. No one smiled. I stood there, surrounded by the scent of peonies and leftover perfume, suddenly unsure why I was there at all. Then Margot said the earrings were missing, the sapphire ones, a gift from the groom's family, worth $85,000. My ears rang. I looked at Madeline, waiting for her to laugh, to shake her head, to say this was some misunderstanding. She didn't. She stared at me like I was a stranger in her home. The planner spoke next. She said I was the last one seen leaving the bridal room, that the earrings were sitting on the dressing table earlier in the day. Now they were gone. I felt my stomach turn to glass. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I told them I hadn't touched anything. I had been helping with the dress, the veil, the flowers. I hadn't noticed any jewelry. Madeline didn't say much at all, just that she was upset, that she didn't want to accuse anyone, but it was strange timing. Margot asked me gently, with too much calm, if I had perhaps picked them up by mistake, that sometimes people do things under pressure. I blinked. My hands started to shake. I wanted to shout, to cry, but I didn't. I looked at my daughter, waiting for her to stop it, to say, Mom would never. She said nothing. Her silence hit harder than anything Margot could have said. In that moment, I wasn't her mother. I was a suspect. Something cracked in me, quietly, so no one else could hear it. I had stood through years of being overlooked, but this was different. This was being stripped of dignity in front of my own child. I stood very still, afraid that if I moved too quickly, I might fall apart completely. I wanted to leave, but I knew this wasn't over yet. Not yet. Margot's voice was soft, almost sweet. When she asked if I wouldn't mind just opening my purse, just to put everyone at ease, she said. It would only take a second. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My hands were still trembling from the first blow. I looked at Madeline again. Her eyes didn't move. My purse was sitting on the bench where I left it. I reached for it slowly, like it might bite. My heart was beating too loud in my ears. I thought if I just explained, if I reminded them who I was, this would end. But before I could speak, the door opened. Erin stepped in. She still had lipstick on her teeth and her shoes in her hands. She looked confused for a moment, then saw the scene, the tension, the silence. She looked at me. Then she asked, real quiet, almost like she didn't want to hear the answer. Mom, did you? I can't explain what that did to me, hearing that from the child I carried through 3 days of labor. The child I stayed up with through every fever and broken heart. It didn't come from hate. That's what made it worse. It came from doubt. Doubt so easy it didn't even need to be earned. I opened the bag, slowly, quietly. I laid everything on the bench. Tissues, lip balm, my phone, a bottle of hand sanitizer, a breath mint, no earrings, no apology. No one said anything. The planner looked at the floor. Margot cleared her throat and mumbled something about stress. Madeline just stood there. She didn't even look surprised. Maybe she thought the earrings would fall out anyway. Maybe she didn't care if they did. I put everything back inside, zipped it up, stood tall, even though everything inside me felt hollow. I looked at all 3 of them, my voice steady but low. Family doesn't treat each other this way. Not even strangers deserve this. Then I walked out, not fast, not loud, just far enough to be out of reach. The hallway outside the suite was quiet, like the world had taken a breath and forgotten to let it out. I walked back to my room with slow, even steps, carrying the weight of something I couldn't name yet. No one followed. No one called out. Just the soft sound of my heels on the carpet and the heavy thud of my heart in my ears. Inside, the room was cold. The lights were still dimmed from earlier, when I'd been rushing to get dressed. Now everything looked frozen, like a place waiting for someone else to arrive. I dropped my purse on the chair and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me didn't feel like mine. Her face was tired, makeup smudged near the corners. Her eyes looked older than they did this morning. She looked like someone who had been left behind, not just tonight, but a long time ago. I slipped off my shoes first. My feet throbbed with every step. I took off my earrings, unfastened the necklace Madeline had given me 3 Christmases ago, and laid them on the counter. Then I wiped off my lipstick, rubbed the foundation from my cheeks. It felt like removing a costume, 1 layer at a time. I peeled away everything I had worn to fit in, to be useful, to be needed. I didn't cry, not then. Just stood there, barefaced and still, like a shadow that finally realized it had no body to follow. Then I heard a knock. It was Ben. He stepped inside, eyes soft, hands deep in his pockets. He didn't say much, just sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me like he wanted to fix something he didn't understand. After a while, he said, "She'll apologize. Mom, just give it time." I nodded, not because I believed him, but because I didn't want him to feel the weight of what I already knew. Some things don't fix with time. Some things just reveal what was never there to begin with. The light came in soft through the hotel curtains. I opened my eyes and, for a second, forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The silence, the looks, the door closing behind me. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, and it lit up before I touched it. 43 messages, a few missed calls, group texts I hadn't been part of before. I opened the first one, then the next. The earrings had been found, in Margot's bag, not just found, but confirmed. A hotel security camera showed her taking them from the table and slipping them into her purse during the chaos before the ceremony. There was no apology, not yet, just vague messages from Madeline asking to talk. One from the wedding planner saying she hoped I was okay. Aaron had sent a string of half-finished thoughts, none of them saying what they needed to. I didn't respond. I sat there for a long time, holding the phone, watching the screen fade to black. It didn't make me happy. It didn't even feel like justice. It just confirmed what I already knew, that people will believe what's easiest, that love, when it's convenient, doesn't stand up to pressure. I stood up, folded the blanket at the foot of the bed, and packed my things slowly. I didn't rush. I wasn't angry. I was just done. The truth came, but not through trust, not through anyone knowing who I was. It had to be caught on camera, and even then, no one ran to my door to make it right. I tucked my phone into my bag and looked at myself one last time in the mirror. Funny how the truth needs video evidence to matter. There was a knock just before noon. I had already packed, already called for a late checkout. I opened the door to find Erin and Ben standing there. Erin looked pale, her eyes swollen like she hadn't slept. Ben held 2 coffees, like this was something that could be softened with caffeine. I stepped aside without saying anything and let them in. Erin was the first to speak. She apologized, over and over, her voice breaking between sentences. She said she didn't know what to believe in the moment, that she was under pressure, that everything had been spinning too fast. I listened, not with anger, not with forgiveness, just with presence, like I was finally seeing the truth of who we all were without all the noise. I told her she had every right to be scared that day, but fear is not an excuse for abandoning people who've always shown up. I reminded her of last spring, when her father invited everyone to Maui, and she told him she didn't want to bring extra baggage. She looked down at her lap when I said it. That was me, her mother, her baggage. Ben stayed quiet, nodding gently, like he knew it wasn't his moment to speak. Erin tried to explain it again, that she didn't mean it the way it sounded, that it came out wrong. I believed her. But that didn't change what it meant. Words only come out like that when you've been carrying them around for a while. I told them both I wasn't angry. I said this wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about respect. The kind of respect I should have been shown years ago, before the wedding, before the earrings, before I had to watch my children forget I was still in the room. Erin reached for my hand, and I let her hold it, but I didn't squeeze back. Not yet. Not because I didn't love her, but because love isn't about staying quiet while someone chips away at you. Love has to come with truth, and truth doesn't always feel like comfort. I told them I needed space, that healing wasn't something I owed anyone. I said they could write if they wanted, but I wouldn't be answering right away. I wasn't shutting the door. I was just closing it gently, for now. Then I stood and walked to the window, watching the city move on outside, feeling a stillness I hadn't known in years. I rolled my suitcase down the hallway, the wheels humming across the carpet like a soft goodbye. The elevator was empty, just my reflection in the metal doors, tired but upright. The lobby buzzed with leftover wedding guests and hotel staff clearing out what was left of the celebration. At the front desk, I handed over the key without a word. The woman behind the counter smiled politely, unaware of everything that had unraveled in that building. I stepped outside into the cool air, the morning sun already warming the pavement. The taxi was waiting by the curb. I stood there with my coat draped over one arm, watching people rush in and out with luggage, coffee, voices too loud for how early it still felt. I kept my eyes forward, but then something in the corner of my vision caught. The doors swung open. Madeline came out running, hair still in curls, makeup fading from the night before. She saw me, raised her hand. She waved, just once, not frantic, almost hopeful. I didn't move. I didn't wave back. I didn't even flinch. I looked at her through the glass, not with anger, not with sorrow, but with a clarity that sat deep in my chest. Then I turned and got into the taxi. As we pulled away, the city began to blur behind the windows. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. She waved. I turned away. I wasn't cold. I was done. 6 months later, I was living in Santa Fe. The air there carried something different, dry, honest, quiet. I rented a small adobe house just outside the town center, with a front porch and a crooked mailbox that looked like it had seen better decades. There was a shed out back that I turned into a pottery studio. The shelves still smelled faintly of cedar, and sunlight poured in through the dusty windows each morning like a soft push to begin again. I started waking up earlier than I used to. No alarm, no rush. Just the natural rhythm of the light shifting across my bedroom floor. I'd roll out my mat, stretch through a short yoga routine, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket I hadn't known I needed. Afterward, I'd make coffee and knead dough for sourdough loaves I never used to have time to make. The smell filled the house by mid-morning. Some loaves I gave to neighbors. Others I froze for quiet evenings with soup and old movies. There were no long messages to wait for, no updates to chase. I no longer checked my phone every hour. Sometimes a full day passed without touching it at all. I didn't block anyone. I didn't erase them. I just stopped bending toward a version of connection that never reached back. That shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in small, unnoticed moments, like not replying right away, like not rereading old messages, like not wondering why someone didn't remember my birthday. The pottery helped more than I thought it would. Something about shaping clay, watching it respond to pressure, then letting it dry and fire into something permanent. It reminded me that change wasn't always loud. Sometimes healing looks like repetition, like learning to center the wheel again. I made cups with uneven handles and bowls that didn't quite match. I kept them all, not because they were perfect, but because I made them with care, without fear of being judged. On weekends, I walked through the local farmers market. People there nodded hello, not knowing anything about me. That felt good. It was the first time in years I'd walked through a place without a label pinned to my chest. Not mom, not ex-wife, not guest at table 7, just Diane. I bought herbs for the kitchen and painted tiny labels for each pot on the windowsill. Basil, thyme, mint. Every little thing became mine again. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for my phone when the sun began to set. It used to be a habit, a reflex, waiting to see if one of the kids would text goodnight or send a photo. But those evenings grew fewer. The urge faded. I stopped measuring my worth by how often they remembered me. I stopped thinking love was only real when someone reached out first. Instead, I let peace in through the back door. It came quietly, through small choices. Choosing stillness, choosing my own company, choosing meals I liked, music I hadn't listened to in years, books I never had time for before. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was mine. And one morning, while throwing a new batch of clay onto the wheel, it struck me. The woman who once ran herself ragged to be needed finally chose herself. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the years, or maybe it was what I carried with me now. I stood at the front step a moment before knocking. Erin opened the door, her face guarded but soft. Ben gave me a small nod from the hallway. Madeline was already seated in the living room, hands folded tightly in her lap. I didn't sit right away. I took out the envelope from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. I told them it was a new draft from my attorney. It outlined my estate, everything I owned, my savings, the house, even the rights to the studio I'd started in Santa Fe. It was all going to Ben. Madeline opened her mouth like she was going to say something, then closed it again. Erin looked at the floor. I told them this wasn't about punishment. I wasn't there to hurt anyone. But I wasn't going to divide my life like a prize in a contest for who remembered to love me. I said trust, once broken, doesn't get handed back out like slices of cake. It has to be earned. And some chances don't come around twice. I turned to Ben and said he had never made me beg to be seen. That when things got hard, he didn't disappear behind silence or doubt. He showed up, even when it wasn't convenient. No one argued. There were no raised voices, just a heavy stillness, like the air itself understood what was happening. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just finally saying the truth out loud, the kind of truth that doesn't need to hurt to be heard. I told them I hoped they found their way. That forgiveness wasn't off the table, but clarity had to come first. I said I had spent too long shaping my life around people who couldn't see me unless I was useful, and I wasn't doing that anymore. They didn't respond right away. Maybe they didn't know how. That was fine. I hadn't come for answers. I came to finish something, to draw a clean line where everything before ended and everything after could begin. Then I picked up my coat and waited for no one to stop me. I walked through the hallway one last time, running my hand lightly across the edge of the wall where we used to hang school portraits. The air felt different now, not heavy, just still. Like the house was waiting for something I no longer carried. I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me without a second glance. The garden looked overgrown in places, lavender stretching past the borders, roses gone a little wild. I remembered planting them years ago, barefoot in the dirt, when the kids were still small enough to chase butterflies and call me for snacks every hour. That version of us was long gone. I didn't mourn her anymore. She had done what she came to do. I walked down the path slowly. The gravel shifted beneath my shoes, but my steps were sure. At the curb, my car waited, quiet and warm in the sunlight. I placed my bag in the back seat, then paused, letting my eyes rest one last time on the house. No one followed, no one called my name, and that was okay. I didn't need a dramatic exit or a desperate goodbye. I needed peace. I needed to leave without taking the burden of their silence with me. Inside the car, I adjusted the mirror, buckled my seatbelt, and took a breath that reached all the way down. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel brave. I just felt real, whole in a way that only comes after walking through something and coming out alone, but intact. If they ever wanted to love me again, they'd have to learn how to see me first, not as a role, not as a convenience, as a person, fully formed, no longer waiting, no longer bending to fit into a picture they never asked me to be part of. As I pulled away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Still no tears, still no turning back, just the soft sound of tires on pavement and the quiet hum of a life finally shifting into its own rhythm. I didn't know what came next, but for once, I wasn't afraid of the blank page. I was finally the one holding the pen.